Good day. We're here at the Fatima Conference, Our Lady's Army of Advocates here in East Hanover, New Jersey. Another excellent event sponsored by the Fatima Center in Fort Erie, Ontario, to discuss various topics related to the crisis in the church, but always, of course, with an emphasis on the message of Fatima. I have with me today Brian McCall, a rising star in academia, a brilliant young fellow, great scholar on the horizon. He's producing more and more work. He's going to be leading a new generation of Catholic scholars as they attempt to reintegrate Catholic social teaching into Catholic thought in academia. Right now, he is Associate Dean for Academic Affairs at the University of Oklahoma School of Law, and I predict that it won't be long before he's either dean of that place or he's plucked by some other school and given a prominent position there. Brian, it's a privilege to have you on the show.
Thank you, Chris.
Another privilege is I was asked to write a preface to your new book, which I've just completed for the book. And your book is, the title is On the City of God and the Commonwealth?
Yes.
And it's a collection of essays written around a central theme. And the central theme is the forbidden thoughts. The forbidden thoughts in political modernity, which are all the teachings of the church on the constitution of the state. Is that a fair summation of where you're going with the book?
It's very much what Pope Benedict said about the traditional Mass, that it can never be that that which was held sacred is condemned by our generation. And beyond the Mass, all the thoughts, political thoughts, understanding of the way the world is, that was held sacred for centuries, is now forbidden. And that's the book, is to stay the forbidden.
Well, it seems like the postconciliar era is an epoch in which the social teaching of the church in the full sense, including what the church has always called the social reign of Christ the King, has gone down into the memory hole. And now the church has become a kind of sociological outreach institution, looking for ways to find common ground with modern man and putting aside all such troublesome things as the claims of Christ on men and nations. And so your book, as I see it, and this is why I agreed to do the preface, is a courageous assault on this conspiracy of silence. But let's talk about your publisher, first of all. I'm really excited about this company. And in interest of full disclosure, they published one of my books, Liberty of the God That Failed. But your book is just one of many other new titles that are coming out from this imprint called Angelico Press, whose president, John Reese, is just a wonderful guy to work with. A brilliant fellow, a Columbia graduate, an Ivy Leaguer like yourself. And he used to be the acquisitions editor at Dover Publications, which was a publishing giant. He's taken all that expertise and devoted it to starting a whole new Catholic publishing enterprise, which is, as far as I can see it, is a success almost from the beginning, because he's finding these niche titles for which there's a real need, and he's putting them out there. And so he's got numerous titles, all of them selling significantly, and all of them contributing to this whole new rebirth that you're a major part of Catholic scholarship.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure working with John and Angelico, getting the book ready, which should be out in the next month and a half from now, so early to midsummer.
Well, let's talk in general terms about the book. In the preface, I point out that we have a situation today where we've got, on the one hand, so-called conservatives, and on the other hand, so-called libertarians, including the radical libertarians. And there's an endless non-debate between these two people, as I put it in the preface, about how and how quickly a once Christian civilization should be lowered into its grave. Because that's what they're really fighting over. How quickly we get to the end. And what would you comment on just that general observation, this non-debate between the conservatives and the libertarians?
Well, exactly. I mean, the conservatives are conserving the last revolution before the libertarians take liberalism to its next stage. So they're fighting over what they want to be the dead carcass of Christendom, of Catholic political, economic, social teaching that they just want to ignore, and in the name of being conservative or whatever they claim, they want to just prepare the road for further revolution, because they don't want to look back to the bulwarks against the revolution that the church has taught for centuries.
Before we get to that teaching of the church, let's pursue this a little bit more. This false dichotomy, or rather the false alternative that is presented to us. Well, we have conservatism, or we have libertarianism. And they feed off each other. Conservatives say, well, the libertarians are crazy radicals, and the libertarians say, well, they're boring conventional thinkers. One of the libertarians, who I won't name, goes around the country talking about how he is courageously abandoning the 3x6 index card of approved opinion. But as I noted in the preface, he's reading from a 4x6 index card of approved opinion, which includes a couple of other approved opinions. The conservatives don't like them, but they're still permissible to hold in America because they're so completely liberal and acceptable. They're just laughed at because they're impractical, but not because they're Catholic. And these acceptable additional opinions on the 4x6 index card would be anarcho-capitalism and the stateless society. What do you think about those two ideas?
Well, I mean, the problem with this viewpoint is that it's a real problem of living in a crisis. They see all of the errors of the society we're living in, the great corruption, the immoral laws that are being propagated, the economy that's falling apart, and they rightly say there's a lot of problems. The problem is they offer more of the same medicine that got us this problem. So instead of saying, we've been off track for several hundred years since these liberal false ideas entered into socio-political thought, and instead of saying, maybe we should go back to the way things were, they say, well, a lot of problems, we can fix them by becoming more liberal, by destroying the state, by destroying political order, by destroying civilization itself. And therefore, what they're really going to do is, as you say, just accelerate us on the road to the end rather than presenting a real solve, a real remedy to the problems that we're facing.
One of the particular things that they bandy about as a means to reach, and I'm talking about the libertarians here, this so-called stateless society is this idea of nullification and secession as they're related, which is just as nullification across the board. Secession is partial, nullification is partial secession. But nullification, that's just an appeal to the majority. Because you're not going to be able to nullify a federal law at the state level unless some majority at the state level agrees it should be nullified. So theoretically, if the Supreme Court were to come to its senses and say, for example, hey, the Fifth Amendment right to life, which cannot be deprived without due process of law, covers the unborn child, a state could nullify that decision. Like Vermont, for example, which would probably nullify it and say, well, this is unconstitutional.
Well, this is the exact problem. Again, there's a real problem. There are these iniquitous laws in our society, but instead of appealing to an objective, perennial standard, the natural law, they want to appeal to a subjective standard. Well, we don't like your law, so we're going to get rid of it. So we're nullifying your law. So then another group can come along and appeal to the same standard. Well, we nullify your nullification of this law. Well, we nullify your nullification of that nullification of this. And it's an endless series of back and forth subjective standards. Rather than saying, objectively, I don't care what we think or you think or they think, this is the truth and the law must conform to reality.
Well, and that happened in America as a practical historical reality. The southern states said, we nullify the Union, in effect. We secede. And Lincoln said, I'm nullifying your nullification. And then within the South, there were people who say, we secede from your secession. You know what this all is? It's the Protestant principle of private judgment applied in various ways to politics.
Right. You're Luther, you adopt this new church. I'm Calvinist. I don't like what you say. I'm going to start my own church. And then we end up with whatever 15,000 denominations of Protestantism we have today.
In fact, one commentator on the situation in the South during the Civil War said, well, when Luther seceded from the Catholic Church, that was a wonderful thing. But then the seceders began to secede from him. And that's what's happening now in the South, this commentator said. The South is breaking apart under the principle of secession because there's no moral standard.
Well, the false principle that's leading to that is where you started with this idea of the stateless society. Because what they want to do is disassemble and destroy human nature. Because we know from the natural law, Aristotle figured this out thousands of years ago. Man is a social and political animal. Man needs to live in society. In fact, he says the only beings that can live out of society are either a god or an animal. Man needs to live in an organized political society. Now, he's not by saying that every political society exists as a good one, because there can be bad political societies, but man needs to live in a society. And so if you hold up an end as a goal of a stateless, a mere collection of individuals, every man for himself, and no social, you're denying part of human nature. And so what you're going to continually end up doing is this crazy system of breaking away, I nullify you, I move away from you, I secede from you, because that's what you're trying to get to, an atomized individual completely separated from his own human nature.
Now, these libertarians always are at the ready with the objection that, oh, you've caricatured my position. We believe in society. We believe in authority. We even believe in law. Why? We believe in the common good. But then when you probe a little further, by society, they mean what you say, everyone for himself. By authority, they mean not government, but the equivalent of government. Oh, we'll have insurance contracts. People will use their premiums to hire protective services from various agencies, and those insurance agencies will have territories. Gee, that sounds like a government to me, except that instead of voting for the government, you pay premiums to the government. But then they say, we believe in law. Well, the law would be administered by private agencies, but these agencies would have the power to enforce the law under the contract. In other words, to use coercion within the communities that use these protective agencies. That's just government by another name. And Nozick, Robert Nozick, in his study of libertarianism, called this minarchy. He said that what these people were proposing with their so-called stateless society is actually a form of the state. But then, of course, because this all rests upon some determination of the majority, even if you entered into the state in some area for some time, at any time the majority could just create a standard government anyway, which is what has happened inevitably throughout history.
And all it is, it's the same error of atheistic communism in the late 19th century. It's a facade for establishing a tyranny. That's all it is. Because the late 19th, early 20th century Pope said, the only protection against tyranny and these oppression is Catholic social teaching, is the understanding of the social reign of Christ the King. Because the rest of this are all facades. This stateless society is really a facade for those who are wealthy enough to buy the biggest premium and pay the most to be able to control the rest. And so they want to abolish American government and replace it with government America Inc.
Yeah.
America, wealthy corporation that exercises all the power of government. I think they're already implementing. If you look at today, what major international corporations have armies, they have spies, they collect taxes, they function more like a government than most governments, and that should be their model, but they are spying on their employees, they are invading privacy much more than President Obama and his government. When he was elected, the American people said they wanted a president to listen to them, and he's listening to everybody through the NSA right now. They're listening and spying on their employees even more. So again, they use this language of freedom, but in the end, it's a road to really a disguised tyranny.
Yeah, there's just various forms of the same thing, which is the tyranny of the majority. Either the majority of premium holders, the majority of voters, but in any case, ultimately, the will of the greater number of people, unbound by any objective standard of morality. And this is where your book comes in the next segment. Let's talk about how you would remedy this situation of political modernity in which authority has no foundation, with the social teaching of the Catholic Church, which lays a foundation for political authority, and that foundation supports all of the rest of a social order, which is controlled by what used to be called the law of the gospel. In the next segment, let's get into the details of your presentation in the book. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Chris.